the Board podcast powered by FanDuel Sportsbook, NFL Week 12 Monday Night Football edition. I'm your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And as always, encourage you to go to FanDuel.com/bettheboard. Take advantage of all sorts of great promotions that FanDuel has made available to you, whether it's 30-1 odds on Monday Night Football, $1,000 risk-free bets. FanDuel has you covered at FanDuel.com/bettheboard. And Payne, another week of NFL football has almost come and gone. May as well start with what we saw transpire in the Queen City last night between the Ravens and Browns, a half of football that may have set the National Football League back plenty of years, given ineptitude from both squads.
It was a division game. That's what it was, right? And you had Lamar Jackson still working his way back from an illness, so I mean he hasn't played in a couple weeks. And I think Stephania Bell had something that was actually very informative, and she had done like a 10-year data dive on quarterbacks that had missed a week with an illness and how they performed the week after. And I believe it was like a 5% drop-off metrically and then another 15% plus in fantasy production. So you could tell Lamar was off, missing some reads. Baker Mayfield, the guy right now is just playing beat up. And if he was an average to an above-average quarterback, now you have that with a shoulder injury and a foot injury. And there's also just not a ton of weapons there. I mean, it's Jarvis Landry, who's a possession receiver, 2 tight ends, and really that's about it. You're relying on your ground game and your offensive line. And Jack Conklin, who returned, left quite quickly in that game, and it sounds like a torn patella tendon, so not great there. And give Wink Martindale some credit. He said that we're going to make Baker beat us through the air. He couldn't really. Sent a lot of run blitzes last night. And so anytime you're the Cleveland Browns and you have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb going for 36 total rushing yards on 15 carries, it's probably not going to be a great night for your offense.
Should I be overly critical of the Browns getting too cute when they have a chance for some momentum multiple times and we get a trick play from Jarvis Landry, who looked like he thought he was going to be able to outrun a bunch of squirts playing football, not realizing there could be pressure coming from behind?
There was some pressure coming from behind. It was a ton of turnovers last night, both sides of the ball. It was a sloppy game. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and when you look at Cleveland, things won't get much easier. They, of course, head into a bye. They'll get the Ravens again in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the Ravens will head to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers, a team that struggled, it might not be a strong enough word, in their performance against the Cincinnati Bengals. But as we always do here on Mondays, we start with the good, the bad, and the ugly, Payne. So I want to give you a chance to highlight a lot of the good. I'll admit I was in transit for most of the day yesterday, did not watch much more than the first quarter of the Bucs and Colts game, so tried to do everything I could, at least through the lens of box scores and reading, more so than watching these games unfold with my very own eyes.
Well, let's start with the game in our backyard here, and much to our chagrin, along with our listeners, had a little quicker start than we thought in the Miami game. Obviously, very difficult to win an under 21 when there is a blocked punt for a touchdown and then a 9-yard touchdown drive after a turnover. But I thought Miami played well. They came out, a lot of energy. This is a team that, shockingly, is still in the playoff mix, and they know that. And I just thought for the first time all year, they went into a game with a fantastic plan, and you could actually sit down and watch and say, hey, that makes sense, and then dig back into the metrics after the game and be like, shit, like Miami had a real offensive game plan and executed it. And so when you just look at Miami's offense, we know where their deficiency lies, right? It's the offensive line. They're 32nd, dead last in pass block win rate. And you are going up against a Carolina defense that is blitz happy, generate a ton of pressure. So if you look, Tua had the quickest time to throw of any quarterback yesterday, 2.3 seconds. Delivered it accurately. Third best completion percentage above expectation. And then all of a sudden what you did in the draft paid off, right? You went out and got like a man beater and Jalen Waddle. And he was dominant against man coverage yesterday, 68% of the team's air yards. Defensively, coverages confused Cam Newton. There is a lot of interchangeable chess pieces in the secondary for Brian Flores. And Cam Newton, 43% below expectation for his completion percentage. Worst mark of any quarterback this season. Now, when I look at him, this is game 2 in a brand new system. Everyone's like, oh, Cam's going back to Carolina. Everything's going to be perfect. It's a brand new system. He wasn't there with Joe Brady. And I think this is an offense that is going to need to adapt to Cam Newton's skill set. If Joe Brady thinks that he's going to be a drop-back passer to get the ball out on time and accurately, this experiment is not going to work. And so that's something to look for here from Carolina moving forward offensively, if this is going to be an offense that's adapted to Cam's strengths a little bit more than what we saw yesterday.
When you look at Tua, I know back-to-back games with over 80% completion, you talked about his numbers above expectation. Have you seen things fundamentally change, or is this a better indication of the Dolphins at least getting an idea of his skill sets, maybe him being a little bit healthier, and a chance to build some momentum in the wake of a 4-game winning streak with two very winnable games on deck when they have home games against both teams hailing from New York?
I was a proponent of going to get Deshaun Watson. Probably still am if the price tag is right. But Tua's made this decision very tough. And I think the problem with Tua is, can you rely on him to be out there? Right? He's constantly having these nagging injuries. But we're now almost 2 years removed from the major hip injury. I think the question mark is like the upside, right? Like what can Tua be in terms of his peak? Like, what is his elite stature? And it's like, he doesn't have the greatest arm strength. He's undersized and he gets beat up. But if you're talking about a guy getting it out on time and quickly and accurately, there's probably few better quarterbacks to run that type of system, because he can do that. You just have to limit the mistakes. And that's the biggest thing, right? You had the Atlanta game where just 2 head-scratching turnovers, and they were both in the green zones. And so that game probably goes a little bit differently. And so those are the question marks with Tua, right? Stop turning the ball over. We do know the upside is somewhat limited due to the arm strength, but he's really fantastic if you look at his accuracy numbers this year.
Yeah, I mean, a Dolphins team that was left for dead, sitting at 1-7, now suddenly, given the muddled mess that is the AFC, maybe can play a role in terms of making the playoff picture as one of the top 7 teams in that particular conference. Speaking of the AFC, though, Payne, we saw a team that I think a lot of us left for dead on Thursday night. Looked like a phoenix rising from the ashes. That, of course, was the Las Vegas Raiders. 500-plus yards of offense, 6.6 yards per play. They ran the ball effectively 35 times for 143 yards. And Derek Carr, maybe more importantly, took care of the football. I know the headlines in that game marred by gratuitous penalty flags, for a lack of a better term. I think Anthony Brown was on the receiving end of 37 pass interference calls. But the Raiders go on the road and knock off Dallas, winning outright as a 7.5-point underdog.
Yeah, I mean, take nothing away from the Raiders. You went on the road as a 7.5-point dog. You're doing something right, especially when your opponent has a special teams touchdown. And overcoming that was huge. This was a much-needed confidence boost. It felt like everything off the field was finally catching up with the Raiders on the field. And they did a great job, right? They stayed alive in the AFC West race. Obviously, things become easier when CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper and Lawrence and Gregory are all out, and Dallas has 166 penalty yards. You hit that perfectly. It was a flag fest. I looked this morning. Those 28 penalties turned into more than 14 expected points added. So talk about influencing a game. Just brutal. But listen, the Raiders got the looks defensively that they were familiar with, right? We knew Dan Quinn and Gus Bradley are two guys that are great friends, coached together in Seattle. They both play lots of cover 3 and cover 1 man. So both offenses were accustomed to seeing the looks the defense was giving them. And so it wasn't an overly difficult task, despite some of those weapons being out for both offenses, really.
Yeah, and suddenly the Raiders now very much a thing in the AFC West. We'll see how they perform going forward, as a couple of teams will knock each other around this coming weekend, and highlighted by the Sunday Night Football game between the Denver Broncos, who got a victory, and of course the Kansas City Chiefs. But speaking of Denver, Payne, didn't have a chance to watch, kind of followed the game on my phone, listened to some of the local broadcasts there. Was it more Denver being good and the defense finally looking engaged, or do we start to blame this Chargers offense that continues to show flashes of brilliance, followed up by 60 minutes of pure unadulterated garbage?
I think this is what the Chargers offense is, right? I mean, anyone that's listened to this podcast knows our feelings on the offense. It's not changed. And I think you have to give Denver some credit out of the bye. Vic Fangio came up with some great things to hinder a young quarterback. This is not the first time he's done that. And you got Patrick Surtain, who's looking like a premium outside cornerback. You got Bradley Chubb back into the fold, so the defense got healthier. And you had 2 weeks to prepare for an offense that has deficiencies in the Chargers. And we've said this time and time again. They do not do the things to exploit defenses. They do not put Justin Herbert in situations to be the best quarterback he can be. And it's fine when you're going up against Pittsburgh on a Sunday night and they don't have the best pass rusher in TJ Watt and they're down multiple guys in the secondary. It's a different look when you have Vic Fangio with 2 weeks and solid players on the defensive side of the ball. So that's really where the game was won. Teddy Bridgewater wasn't great, exited the game for a little bit. There was that swing in momentum where you thought the Chargers may actually steal the game, right? Teddy goes down, you're up 14-0. Locke comes back into the game. You have it in plus territory. You can go up 3 scores before the break, and Locke throws a pick. And then the Chargers get the momentum score. And it's 14-7 at the break, and you're like, ah, crap, here we go. It's going to be Drew Locke. But Teddy Bridgewater came back in. The defense did a great job. They were on the field a ton in the third quarter. And then you got some big interceptions from Patrick Surtain, one in the end zone and then one that was a pick six. And that's ultimately what decided this game, right? Denver's offense did enough early. The defense was fantastic throughout.
Yeah, it's what it takes sometimes. You need that collective effort, and suddenly the Broncos have won 3 out of their last 4. And again, another team that's put themselves in the thick of things as it pertains to getting into the wild card picture in the AFC. But you mentioned the Steelers and wanted to see if this was a good transitional point, if we want to give credit to the Cincinnati Bengals for their performance, or if we start to head into the bad, talking about the Steelers absolutely embarrassed by a divisional foe. They were out of that game almost as soon as it kicked off.
Yeah, that was a box-to-wire beatdown. Both sides of the ball were fantastic. Cincinnati came out, wanted to establish the run. Joe Mixon showed real well, despite facing a loaded box on 32% of his carries. Mixon had the 6th best rushing yards per attempt over expectation. Thought Joe Burrow was very efficient. Did have the one overthrow that got picked off. But I think the positive there is he showed that he's 100% healthy on that rushing touchdown. He did well all day, right? Through with anticipation. That touchdown pass to Higgins was thrown before Higgins was even remotely open. So Joe Burrow is looking very good. Completion percentage 16% above expectation. The Bengals defense also set the tone in the first half, right? You had 2 early 3-and-outs. When the Steelers did get into the green zone, held to 3, and then you cap off the half with the pick 6. This is interesting to me and something that I'm going to kind of keep my eyes on here, but this is the second time Cincinnati's faced Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's an offense that just is what it is, right? It can't really change. It doesn't have the parts to change things. It just felt like Cincinnati knew what was coming before the ball was ever snapped.
Bengals have had the Steelers number. First time they swept the season series since 2009. They even had a good performance against them last year with a healthy Joe Burrow. So we know that the Steelers are a team trending in the wrong direction. You begin to wonder if this is a Bengals team, like you said, that not only has their number, but is very much going to play a role in how this division plays out. When you look at the Bengals' upcoming schedule for their next 5 games at home, none of which appear to be slam dunks on paper by any stretch of the imagination. When you look at the Chargers, 49ers, a road trip to the Broncos, followed by home dates against the Ravens and Chiefs. But I do have to give Zach Taylor a bit of credit for a team that came into the season with their over-under set at 6.5. They've exceeded expectations, and Joe Burrow clearly emerging as one of the league's best quarterbacks and leaders all at the same time. As far as other good Payne, I wasn't sure if there was anything else you wanted to highlight before we decide we eviscerate the Rams in that lethargic performance against the Packers.
I think you have to give Mac Jones some credit as well. I mean, his maturation is continuing. I know he missed one pass yesterday that he'd love to have back, but overall, fantastic performance. Again, completion percentage 4% above expectation, had a 123 passer rating. He is getting the ball out on time. He knows exactly where it's supposed to go pre-snap. He's able to read post-snap. I mean, he's just been fantastic, and he's really taking that offense to another level, right? Like yesterday, the ground game with Stevenson and Harris wasn't what it had been typically performing like. The output just wasn't there, and Mac Jones was awesome, made up for it. And so I think we really have to start valuing what the Patriots are doing. And I know everyone's in love with their defense. They really haven't played a ton of great offenses. And I think that unit probably isn't as good as people believe, even though Belichick is running it. Offensively, though, is where the Patriots are starting to surge a little bit here. And so if there's a situation where Mac Jones can continue that improvement, right? Like, let's say what he does from week 12 to week 16 grows as much as what he has from weeks 1 to 11, Patriots are going to be pretty scary.
Is this finally the year that Josh McDaniels goes, all right, I've proven enough. We knew what he was capable of in the past, and doesn't stick around in New England and wait for Bill Belichick to retire and decides to take a head coaching job once it becomes available?
I think that's probably the big question, what becomes available. I mean, he was an epic disaster on his own, and so that is still looming in people's minds. Someone's actually got to want him. And so maybe that changes after you see what Mac Jones has done. And certainly you don't know what you don't know. So the second time around might be something better for Josh McDaniels, but he was horrific the first go around, and that's going to cause some pause. So I don't know if it's just been him waiting around for Bill Belichick to retire. I'm not sure people were knocking on his door as much as others think.
It's always an interesting question. When you see guys get multiple chances somewhere along the way, we've seen the difference Lane Kiffin could make, a guy that was in over his head at multiple stops previously, finally realizing the fruits of his labor at Ole Miss. We'll see if there's an NFL parallel there to be made for Josh McDaniels, or like we said, him hanging around working with Mac Jones. What's interesting when you look at Mac's performance, clearly he's taken and caught the eye of odds makers out there. We talked a little bit about what his numbers were to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year, right around even money. I've seen that number as high as $3 to $4 with Jamar Chase's recent struggles. I use that term relatively loosely, but it was T. Higgins with the big day in the win against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Los Angeles Rams, Payne, when we look at the bad, I mean, now losers of 3 straight games. They come out of the bye week. Matthew Stafford didn't look all of that sharp. But defensively, I mean, this is a team that has a ton of star power. We know Jalen Ramsey is truly elite in the defensive backfield. But for extended stretches there, Green Bay was able to do what they wanted, both throwing the football and even running it between the tackles.
How did I know this was going to make your bad list?
This is actually a game I wanted to go back and watch because I listened on radio. I went back.
Yes, I know.
I went back and watched.
Let's set this up. Let's set this up for our listeners. So, for our listeners at home, this is where sometimes we dig into the numbers a little bit, and it can get monotonous and a little dry, and so we got to spice it up here. Let's paint this picture.
We can.
So the sharp side of this game was the Rams. We talked about it on our podcast when they were +1. I said they're going to close a favorite.
Which they did, 100%.
Despite Aaron Jones,
2.5.
Yes, despite Aaron Jones getting upgraded, which a lot of people did not expect. And Todd did not want anything to do with the Rams, but like a good soldier, he's like, I'm going to trust the information. And he was on the Rams.
That's correct.
They did not win. Todd did not watch the game. He was traveling, so he got home, dug into the ESPN box score, and said, I'm going to throw him on this bad list.
I listened.
And here we are.
I did listen to the game as well, and I told you going into it, hey, look, like you said, I'm a team player here. I trust the information. It's a hell of a lot better than what I'll ever be able to glean on my own. The Packers are a team that I'll admit has owned me personally. I feel every time I bet against them at Lambeau, they own me.
They've owned us all. I mean, it is a tough nut to crack at Lambeau. Listen, the Rams just aren't buttoned up, right? It's like a collection of high-end talent that's having trouble playing within a scheme right now. And let's forget the fact that the offense isn't humming right now. Green Bay scores 19 points on 25 total yards. 19 of their points came on 25 total yards. A fumble, a stop on downs, a fumbled punt, a pick six where Cooper Kupp gets boxed out. It's tough enough beating Green Bay and Lambeau. Give them 19 points, and it's mission impossible.
That is a fact.
But at its core, your offense is now Cooper Kupp. That's it. And he's fantastic, right? Fits the system well, but he's not a speedster. He's not an athletic specimen. He's not a big body guy. You can't line him up outside and say, go win. Right? So, to a certain extent, you can scheme him out of the game. Robert Woods is gone. OBJ is in and doesn't have the full playbook, and he was hobbling around with injuries. We knew when he was with Cleveland, He had 2 separated shoulders that are going to require surgery. He's now got a back injury. I understand the thought process, right? It was like all in. It was a relatively cheap buy. Robert Woods goes down. Let's go get this guy. Let's see if things change. Defensively, you hit this perfectly. That's where I was more disappointed with the Rams. 3 offensive linemen were out for Green Bay. I didn't even know Aaron Donald was out there yesterday.
Yeah, you said that was one thing that was one thing that was pretty telling. You sent me that text, and I actually listened to the Green Bay feed on radio. It's always, by the way, a throwback to Bears fans out there. It's still so weird when you hear Wayne Larrivee calling Packers game when you grew up listening to him on radio calling Bears games. But even they made mention multiple times that either it was the scheme, and of course not seeing it, that Aaron Donald, they expected to call his name a lot more than they did throughout at least the first 3 quarters of that game when it was within 1 score.
The Rams' pressure was non-existent in the first half, wasn't great in the third quarter, finally started getting home late in the fourth quarter. But as bad as the Rams played in the first half, it's 20-17 at the break, right? You're fine. You survived all the bullshit. And the Packers are backed up to start the half, 1st and 22 inside their own 15. Green Bay goes on an 8-minute touchdown drive. You couldn't get off the field. You have Jalen Ramsey, Von Miller, and Aaron Donald. I get you want to be a scheme defense, but at some point you need to unleash those 3 and just let them go, right? Like there can't be a situation on 3rd and 2 where the Packers hit Adams for like a 40-plus yard explosive because Jalen Ramsey isn't covering him. And I get it, right? Like LaFleur's very good. He's going to move Adams around. He's going to motion him, and he's going to try to get him away from Jalen Ramsey. But if you're going to give up multiple first-round picks and pay Ramsey the largest contract for a corner in football, you have to have him traveling with Adams. There can't be a situation where that's not the case. And so it just, Von Miller, I think, had like one really massive pressure, and that's kind of where you're like late in the game. You're like, okay, maybe if they can get something going offensively, there's a chance here, because towards the end of that game, Rodgers was hobbling around. It's clear, right? I know he had the early rushing touchdown, and they probably shot him up, and it was good. It was good to start the game.
You get one good half. You get one good half with a little bit of pharmaceutical aid.
Yeah, and then you could just, from like middle of the third quarter on, he's just out there laboring. But, and just, again, it's not a buttoned-up team. So Stafford wasn't pinpoint accurate by any stretch. But again, like the pick 6, I would probably give half his fault, half Cooper Kupp's fault. Like he kind of comes out of his break soft. He gets boxed out by a bigger cornerback who's got momentum coming down. You had Van Jefferson not come back to 2 balls where he like runs this like 17-yard comeback, and he just kind of sits there and doesn't come back to the ball. But yeah, I mean, Stafford right now, we can get into that situation with the injury. Clearly he's not 100%. I do think the news that broke on Sunday was probably a little late and exaggerated. We certainly know that Stafford's a tough guy and he's playing through some injuries. It's week 12. Basically everybody is at this point. But if you kind of just follow the tea leaves with the injury, you go back to the Titans game, and that's a week where Stafford is not at practice, does finally put in a limited on Friday. And then you get the following week where he misses, I believe, Wednesday, and then it's limited Thursday and limited Friday. But you get the bye week.
Yep.
And he was not on the injury report at all this week. And so if you're telling us he's got a back injury in week 10 and he's not on the injury report here, and he's had 2 weeks off, he's clearly better now than when he was 2 weeks ago. So that's why those reports, like, it's tough to, the market is ultimately like the indicator, right? Like the guys betting, and I hate to say this, the guys betting 6 figures, right, on these games are going to have better information than Diana Rossini. That's just the reality of it, right? When a game moves 5 points, like there's information here, right? Those guys aren't betting 6 figures on a game with, Matthew Stafford, at 12% is kind of what the reports made it sound like he was. He was like, the report made it sound like he was being held together by super glue and a couple twigs.
It's Matthew Stafford, the Todd Gurley injury report from the Rams. We know we can't trust that organization, but no, all kidding aside, when you look at these two teams, and this isn't an endorsement or advocating to bet either one of them in the futures market, given where they both are through week 12, we know Green Bay has a bye. We know about the toe injury for Aaron Rodgers. Which one of these sides do you think is more capable of making a deep run in the NFC? The Rams, the way they're currently constructed, or the Packers if Rodgers' toe doesn't become a bigger issue?
I think it's got to be the Packers. All right, and you hate to be like a prisoner in the moment, and what I just said was fully truth, right? Like
Yep.
19 points just gifted away. But they do have the ability to play multiple ways, right? Bakhtiari is going to be on his way back. You would think Aaron Rodgers' foot improves a little bit over time. Jair Alexander going to return at some point. And so from that perspective, you see a team that's able to play multiple ways. You have a first-year defensive coordinator, so the scheme is only going to get picked up better by the players. And so that's kind of how I would look at this. And I think their home field advantage, as we talked about at Lambeau, is one that is really tough to ignore. So I just feel like right now Green Bay is a little bit better positioned. I do think, obviously, the best team in football and in the NFC is still Tampa.
Yeah, I can't argue that given what we saw there. Speaking of Tampa, well, maybe we should have hit on them with the good. The Colts had a chance to kind of put them away. They're up double digits. They're driving with a 10-point lead. Tampa gets the momentum play, and then it kind of all snowballs from there. You do feel bad for folks that got the best of the number with the Colts plus 3.5 with the game, the way that game ended. What were your takeaways from the Bucs road win 38-31 over Indianapolis yesterday?
I thought the matchup was really good going into the game for Tampa's offense. It proved to be, despite the slow start. They were trying to get like too cute early. I didn't really like Byron Leftwich's opening script at all, and the initial game plan wasn't great. And then finally Tom's like, let me just take this shit over. And they started moving the ball with ease. What we saw from the Colts, though, I think, let's see, right? You have the Texans on deck this week. That should be a win. You're going to make the playoffs. And I think if they can get the secondary healthy, this is a very scary team. I am all on board, right? And this is someone, and we're kind of transitioning away from Tampa because it's easy, right? Like Tampa's really free.
Yeah, we know how good they are. That's
we know
point.
that.
Yep.
I think as we kind of transition here off the cuff into the Colts, what I saw from them early on, I immediately said to myself, and again, not trying to be a prisoner of the moment, boy, this team, with the way the AFC is looking right now, they could be a Super Bowl contender. Because I really like Frank Reich. I do. There are times where, again, you open the game, you get a great possession starting on Tampa Bay's 30, and I understand you have Jonathan Taylor, but it can't be 1st and 10 run, 2nd and 10 run, and then you end up settling for a field goal, right? You got to be a little bit more aggressive, and there's still these people out there like, Carson Wentz sucks. The guy's like top 5 in EPA since like week 6, right? Like we got to get over this. And I'm the guy who told everybody that Carson Wentz wasn't a thing in Philadelphia, and people hated me for it, and I was proven correct. And now we sit here, and at the beginning of the year, I was saying, hey, Carson Wentz has basically had like one good season where he had anomaly performances on 3rd down, and that's why he looked fantastic. And now I'm still able, because this is a market, to transition and kind of see with his eyes. It is very clear that him and Frank Reich are on the same page, and Frank Reich has full trust in Carson Wentz. And the offense yesterday was substantially better when Carson Wentz was throwing it. He is not a problem. He's just got to occasionally, right? We can't throw with our left hand. We can't have the timely mistake. But Carson Wentz has been really fantastic. And you think about that maturation for him. The Colts have started slow virtually every season. The guy had foot surgery and didn't get a chance to get acclimated with this new system, with his new players, basically all of camp. The offensive line was in shambles to start the season. Braden Smith was hurt. Quentin Nelson had surgery, was hurt. Eric Fisher was still recovering from an Achilles tear and missed the first couple weeks, so you didn't have the offensive line to where it was. But I really think the offense is going to be just fine. And defensively is the question, can you get healthy on that side of the ball? Buckner is dealing with a little bit of a back injury. We know Leonard's dealing with an ankle injury, right? The secondary is still a little bit banged up. Can you get some of those guys healthy there? If that happens, no one's going to want to play the Colts in the AFC.
Hey, I mean, this team has shown flashes. There's no doubt for stretches. I think yesterday was more stubbing their toe, but what a couple of games we're going to see from Indianapolis coming up. They get Houston, they get the bye week, and then back-to-back Saturdays under the bright lights. They'll host New England at home. They'll go on the road to Arizona, and I think those will be outstanding watches to figure out what the ceiling truly is for this Indy team. You mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles, Payne, and Carson Wentz and everything that went on there. Jalen Hurts reminded us yesterday against the New York Football Giants, while he may be elite as a runner, his passing game leaves an awful lot to be desired. And while I won't put all of the blame for the 13-7 loss on his shoulders, knowing that Jalen Reagor dropped not one, but 2 touchdown passes, what did you see from Philadelphia? Because a lot of people had talked them up as a legitimate threat to make the playoffs in the NFC. I still think this team is extremely flawed, and they're going to be held back by offensive limitations.
Really missed a golden opportunity yesterday, right? I mean, Dallas has dropped 2 straight games. You win yesterday, you're a game back in the win column, and you have another matchup against Dallas. So yesterday was difficult, right? And gotta watch what I say here. Being somewhat close to that situation, I see what Jalen Hurts is doing. Right, I understand if you look at some of the charting stuff, like the guy can only throw to one side of the field. Now, defenses might not have discovered that, but that's like the reality of the situation. Is he going to get better? Is he a guy that works his tail off? Yes. Is he like a good locker room guy? Is he a great dude? Yes. And so there's a ton of potential improvement there, right? And they're throwing up numbers on the screen about how great he's been compared to Lamar Jackson through the first couple starts. There's one group that absolutely loves the Eagles, and that's why we've seen this movement, right? And that's the reason they got to a peak of like 4.5 yesterday, and then finally, even though Sterling Shepard was out and Kadarius Toney was out, we finally had like another group come and be like, this is just kind of insane, laying 4.5 on the road, and so that's why it closed like 3.5, soft 4. So there was kind of a battle there last week. But you look at where the Eagles have done well over the last couple weeks, and you think about some of those games. It's a beaten and battered Saints team. It is a fantastic matchup in Denver where their front 7 is decimated by injury, and Jalen Hurts doesn't really have to be an effective passer. You can just run the ball 40 times. You had the Lions, okay? And the one team that you played within this streak that we don't even think is a great team, right, that we have power rated, it's going to scare some people, below average in the Chargers. You lost that game at home. So really what you've done over this stretch is beat a wounded Saints team, a Broncos team who I think had 1 starter from their opening day front 7, and the Lions. And so I understand that you've performed above expectation in those games, right? I mean, you trounce the Lions. I think you were a 3-point road favorite there. You were an opening dog against the Broncos, and then you were a small favorite against the Saints. So not only were you winning those games, you were crushing it metrically, and you were exceeding expectations against the odds makers. So awesome. But it's still not an elite team, right? You're still looking for that receiver. Smith is good. Watch some of the games. He can still get bumped off his routes based on his weight. So he's not truly elite yet. Jalen Reagor, as you mentioned, all could have been forgotten about with a 14-13.
Ball hit the dude right in the hands. Hit the ball, hit him right in the hands.
Twice. So all could have been forgotten had you gone and had the come from behind drive where Jalen Hurts, takes your team 80+ yards for a touchdown drive to win on the road against a division foe, and everything's right in the world. But there are some underlying things, right? And so that's just what it comes down to. Really what we've pegged with Philadelphia is they're great if they have a matchup advantage in the trenches on both sides, right? If they can run the ball, if they can get pressure, and they have that advantage on both lines, they're going to fare well in those games. If it becomes a stalemate where the opposing team has 2 good lines, then it's going to be tough sledding for the Eagles. And not saying the Giants have 2 great lines, but their defensive line is on paper pretty good. Now, they haven't been great against the run this year. They've really fallen off, but the 2 guys inside have traditionally been very good run stoppers for the Giants, and they were good on Sunday.
If you have the 9th, 10th, and 14th pick in the draft like the Eagles do if the season ended today, I'm picking up the phone. I'm calling the Houston Texans and going, just name your price. Name your price. Let us get our man, and we can move on from there to make Deshaun Watson the face of that franchise. Again, no knock on Jalen Hurts, but we know what he is limited by, and the capabilities never going to, in my opinion, be that true franchise quarterback that can elevate all the players around him. Wanted to give you a chance to cover any ground that we may not have hit on in terms of the good, bad, and ugly before we take a quick look at look-ahead lines and then get into the Monday Night Football matchup between Seattle and Washington.
No, I think we're good. Let's get this show on the road. We got the Monday Night Football breakdown. We got some look headlines, and we got some contest updates.
That we do. We'll update those contest winners in a matter of moments. I want to remind all of you, follow Payne on Twitter, @Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, follow the podcast @BetTheBoardPod. And look ahead numbers, Payne, Thursday night, as they do every year, the week after Thanksgiving. We'll see the Dallas Cowboys in prime time, a number where they were a 4.5-point favorite, price out to 6, as much to do with the Saints' struggles as they continue to figure out what that quarterback position is going to look like. Ezekiel Elliott, we'll see if he is or isn't available amid speculation that Dallas may rest his ailing knee, but a modest move here onto a secondary key number.
And even more modest, because as we speak, the Saints have taken some money down back to 4.5 some places, 5.5 other places.
There we go.
We're back off that 6. Let's see what happens with all of the injury news. That's basically what this comes down to. All signs would point to Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb being back. There's some rumblings that both Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence could return for the Cowboys as well. Obviously a steep price. It did not matter on Thursday. We thought similar, right? We kind of saw that battle going on where the guys that laid 4 took back some 7 on the Saints. It just didn't matter. Buffalo is the right side box to wire. There's just not a lot the Saints offense can do when it's in that state. We'll have to monitor the situations there, right? Like Alvin Kamara has now been out, I believe, 2 games. You're going to have extended rest having played the Thursday game. Is he back here? Is Mark Ingram back? Is Ryan Ramczyk returning? Right? So those are key things for the Saints offensively here. We'll have to monitor those. That ultimately, I think, will decide where this line goes, but not a ton of movement now that we as we are recording this, a tiny little wave of Saints money came in.
Just saw it get peppered as we speak, so 4.5 to 5.5. Otherwise, wouldn't have made the look-ahead line adjustments here. The Cincinnati Bengals at FanDuel Sportsbook, they were a 1-point favorite as they'll play host to the Los Angeles Chargers before we saw Week 12 games unfold. That number now out to a soft 3.
Yeah, I think this is one of the largest discrepancies from pro bettors to public bettors. And I think if you polled prior to yesterday even, right? Like, let's forget the Denver loss for a minute. Prior to yesterday, if you polled 10 NFL fans and said, what do you think of the Chargers? All 10 of them would say this is a above average football team. Prior to yesterday, I'm looking at this right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Makes for great podcasting, by the way. Counting. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
We'll supply a visual. I mean, you send out a GIF and you'll be all set.
Yeah, like the Count Dracula guy from
1,
Sesame
2,
Street
3.
Yeah. So they were in our bottom third of NFL teams power rated. This is before yesterday's loss. There is a misconception, I think, between public and pros on the Chargers. They're struggling offensively, have all the talent in the world. Let's see if Joe Lombardi can get things turned around. Defensively, we know it is a scheme. There's not a ton of dudes on that side of the ball past Derwin James. Asante Samuel was out again with a concussion, his second one this season. Suddenly you lose your best cover corner. Things aren't going to look great. They didn't go and get a big mauler up front at the trade deadline, which is kind of the key to play this style of defense. So look for that in the offseason for the Chargers to improve. They're going to find a run stuffer that can take on 2 blocks in the middle of their defense. Linval Joseph at this age cannot do that. So, yeah, I mean, the defense just doesn't have a ton of talent, and the offense isn't operating optimally right now.
A week from today, we'll be able to preview one of arguably the biggest Monday Night Football games we'll see this season, so don't want to spend a ton of time on it now.
Yes.
But you're looking at the Buffalo Bills, a look-ahead favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook -4. This number trending closer into that soft 3 range, despite the Bills dominating the New Orleans Saints on Thanksgiving, but New England continuing to move in the right direction in terms of their overall power profile.
Yeah, their power numbers continue just to shoot up. Let's see what... And this is really a tough game to gauge because you think the Patriots' defense looks great on paper. They haven't played anybody. Buffalo's defense looks great on paper. First time they step up in class, they look miserable. Now I get it. Edmonds, the leader in the middle of the defense, was out. Starr was out in the middle of the defense as well. You're also now down Tre'Davious White. So This is an interesting one. I think I'm probably not going to have a position on the side here.
Hey.
Could have something else on this game. We'll break it down on Monday. Potential weather in the forecast. Let's see what that looks like. But I know we'll deep dive this game a little bit later in the week.
For sure. I mean, this will be a Monday night game that gets our undivided attention, unlike some of the duds that we've been fed so far this season. So don't want to go too far into it now. Just worth highlighting for a lot of our listeners there. And if you want to be able to bet the look-ahead lines, it's fanduel.com/bet-the-board. Take advantage of their $1,000 risk-free bets, all sorts of other unique promotions, not only for the National Football League, but you have plenty of college football championship games coming up this weekend, NBA, NHL action, you name it, FanDuel's got it. FanDuel.com/bet-the-board. And Payne, the final week of final game of NFL Week 12 takes us to the nation's capital, where it's Seattle, a 1 point.
Gotta tell you, it made me quite excited.
Yeah, Seattle, a 1 point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. This total has been on the climb, ticking up out to 47.5. When you look at Seattle, this is a team in its last 18 games that's been dominated by defense. They're 15-2-1 to the under. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Washington football team, they're well known for a lot of things. Futility on Monday night would be one of those things as well. They last won on Monday night back in 2012. And if I trust some of the numbers that were portrayed in an article, 5-23 straight up on Monday Night Football since 2000. When you look at Seattle, has the market moved far enough given their offensive struggles, knowing that Russell Wilson hasn't looked quite the same quarterback since returning from his finger injury?
I think this is one of the trickier handicaps that we've had this season, certainly in primetime. And I got a note earlier in the week that Seattle was going to be the side. And then you watch the market go from Seattle -2.5 to +1, and I was left kind of scratching my head. Listen, it's clear that Russell Wilson is 100%. This was an 8-week injury. His doctor said it was the worst finger they've done surgery on, and Russ was back in 4 weeks. Seattle's offense was struggling before Russ ever went down, so there wasn't a chance in hell him coming back at less than 100% after a month off was just going to be like, poof, Seattle's offense is great again. It just wasn't going to happen. There's also some internal issues, right? DK Metcalf is not happy. Pete Carroll's storming out of post-game press conferences after only a single question gets asked. And if you're a Seahawks fan,
the end is near.
Enjoy it.
The end is near.
Because, you are almost certainly going to be living in a world where another quarterback is under center next season. Because, where there's smoke, there's fire. And Russ wants out is all the information I've been given. And just kind of leave it there. Okay? Now, this game does have the potential to be like, when you were a kid, right, playing with your friends, you acted much differently when it was just you and your friends than when your parents were around. So this is a nationally televised game, so I would expect the Seahawks to kind of be on their best behavior here, so to speak. I also think there is some interesting matchups, right? Like getting away from the information, getting away from some of the narrative stuff. A couple of things stood out as positives for Seattle's offense. There should be positive regression on the way for late downs because the Seahawks are shockingly above average in first down efficiency, 13th to be exact. They're elite with second down efficiency, 3rd. But that variance down, right? Third down, 4th down, Seattle is bottom 5 in the league in efficiency. And it's one thing to be like bad on 3rd downs when you're staring at 3rd and a mile. But when you're efficient on early downs and your quarterback is Russell Wilson, it's quite surprising. And so we may see that positive regression start to shift tonight for Seattle because Washington's defense dead last in the NFL in 3rd and 4th down efficiency. You're also looking at a large schedule dip here. Seattle's faced the second toughest schedule of defenses according to our metrics. I believe DVOA has them as the 4th toughest. You have a top 10 schedule of passing defenses faced for Seattle. And now you get Washington, 31st in the NFL in defensive efficiency, 30th in defensive pass efficiency. Chase Young and Montez Sweat, both starting pass rushers, are out. Washington this season hasn't really gotten natural pressure, and certainly not the natural pressure you would have hoped for 4 first-round picks along the D-line. So Jack Del Rio has sent blitz at the 3rd highest rate in the league. The best part of Russell Wilson's game this season has been against the blitz. 126 passer rating this season. Hasn't made a single turnover-worthy throw against the blitz. 81% adjusted accuracy. 8.2 yards an attempt. So, as down as Russell Wilson's play has been, still fantastic against the blitz. The big matchup is on the inside of this line. Let's see if Seattle's interior O-line can hold up. Starting guard Damian Lewis looks like he's out. Gabe Jackson, Ethan Posick haven't really had the years Seattle's envisioned. But if the interior of Seattle's O-line can hold up against Allen and Payne and Ioannidis, there's some real edges here for Seattle's offense, Todd.
Before we get to the other side of the ball, some breaking news, and we understand why we saw that wave of Saints money comes in. Mike McCarthy will be unavailable to coach the Dallas Cowboys on Thursday, testing positive for the Big C. You do wonder how that will impact the rest of the Cowboys coaching staff as well, although I would make the claim that no Mike McCarthy means you should probably upgrade the Dallas Cowboys in a one-game sample size, but that's the reason that report
yes.
breaking a little while ago.
There was also the report that came in Thursday. There was other guys there on the offense that had it, right? Like I think Joe Philbin and a couple other position coach guys had it, so it looks like it's kind of going through the locker room, so to speak.
Yep, and we'll see what players may or may not be out there for them as well, just to kind of contextualize some of that before we finish up with one of their biggest rivals in the division. And so you talked about the Seattle offense potentially having an edge against the Washington defense. It's been a bit of a paper tiger. On the other side of the ball, Payne, Washington appears to have found its swagger, at least for a couple of weeks, with Taylor Heineke, a 127 passer rating since week 10, more than 8.5 yards per attempt since that time period, and a 78% completion percentage. Plus, you also have a couple of potential weapons back in the mix for the Washington football team that should be able to put some pressure on the Seahawks defense.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Turner really used the bye week, and he's made some clear adjustments. The last two games, Washington 6th in EPA per play despite facing the Bucs and Panthers defenses, who are like two top 7 defenses. There should be an advantage with J.D. McKissick and Antonio Gibson as pass catchers out of the backfield. Seattle's given up the most receiving yards to running backs this season, bottom 8 in receptions allowed. Almost 85% of running back targets have been caught against Seattle. They're giving up 10.4 yards a reception to running backs. One of the least efficient defenses defending running back pass. So look for those two guys to get into the full catching balls. It sounds like, as you mentioned, Washington's going to get some of the studs back on offense. All signs point to Logan Thomas, Curtis Samuels being back tonight. Let's see the Curtis Samuels thing, right? It sounded like at one point they wanted to shut him down and have surgery. He's kind of fighting back now that they're back in the mix a little bit. I don't know how healthy he is. Logan Thomas should be good to go, though. Two things would concern me just a touch. You have Washington's starting tackle, Sam Cosmi, out. And starting center Tyler Larson is also out. Larson was already a backup center. So Washington is down to their third string center tonight. If you also look at the defenses Washington's played, they faced a bottom 10 schedule of run defenses. The only win Washington has had this season against the top 10 run defense was out of the bye against Tampa. Vita Vea was injured in that game. I say that because Seattle is 9th in defensive rush efficiency. So let's see what this looks like if the ground game isn't going. I'm also interested to just kind of see the approach of Scott Turner because, again, out of the bye, he's changed some things. He's been spades the last 2 games. And, you know, you get Logan Thomas, you get Curtis Samuel back. If they're 100% healthy, you pair those guys with McLaurin. We already talked about McKissick and Gibson out of the backfield catching passes. There is an advantage through the air here for Washington on paper, right? They face one of the 5 toughest schedules of passing defenses. You get Seattle 25th in pass defensive efficiency, who is without Trey Brown, who's out for the year. He's a starting corner. So there is some opportunities here through the air for Washington. This is just one of those tough games, right? There's some internal issues for both teams. There's some things going on, right? The number here, like Seattle -1, feels like the perfect line. We made Seattle -2.5 on a neutral. Monday Night Football, I know you mentioned some of the trends. They do not favor Washington. They're just not a good history there. Probably something there. This is a completely different team, different organization, different coaching staff, different quarterback. Like, everything's changed there. Like, I would still maybe give Washington 1.5 for home field. So, again, you're kind of like in this Seattle -1 range, which, again, I think is probably the perfect number. I know, again, my guys were saying Seattle would come in. It did a little bit. They're now a favorite at some of the sharper shops. Let's see where this ultimately closes. Todd, just kind of for full-blown discrepancy here. I think, in our contest, we're forced to pick 5 games for the contest. And so most weeks pick 4 and 5, sometimes even the third best pick we have doesn't actually make the personal card where you're investing large sums of money. I think Seattle was like 7th on the lean list for us this week. So that's just kind of how we're viewing this game, right? The situation feels like Seattle, and if you can get Russ and DK on the same page, they're probably going to show a game effort here. But and just kind of like looking at the schedules, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to have a penny on this game, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's a team that we've seen play its best under the bright lights when Russell Wilson was at its best and Pete Carroll was at the peak of his coaching tenure up there. But you do wonder, to your point, how much some of the off-the-field stuff and a marriage headed for divorce in the not-so-distant future will play itself out. Can they let bygones be bygones, at least for a 60-minute sample size, and realize some of that potential? Oftentimes, you want to try and bet on known commodities, or when you feel you have an edge. If there isn't one, there's no reason to run to the window and pay 11 to 10 to flip coins. Anything else, Payne, you'd like to add on this particular game before you announce some of the big winners in our Bet the Board contest?
No, I think that's it. Let's get into it. As always, we run
maturity.
It's unbelievable.
Maturity off the scales this morning around the Bet the Board corporate offices.
I'm looking at the screen here and kind of off track mind. So yes, 3 Apple Podcast winners. We say this all the time. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review, leave a nice little comment, and you get automatically entered into these contests. We'll run them every couple months or so, right? It helps us out because of the algorithms and whatnot. We're not a network. We're not getting the pump from podcast networks or ESPN or Fox or any of those guys, right? It's just us, right? And so you guys are the driving force for that, and 5-star reviews help the algorithm. So we like to give back. The 3 winners, $100 cash each. Shoot us an email. Just go to the contact page on our website, bettheboard.net. It's atop the screen. So when we announce your name, just shoot us a contact and we'll get you $100 cash each. Wesky28 is the first winner. Kyrie 4L is the second. And Gators 8282 is the third. Also,
you feel comfortable in the wake of what transpired Saturday, awarding someone with the Twitter handle Gators8282 winning one of our awards?
Well, that's how you know these are completely random, right? It's an automated system we're using. So, I was in a good mood, Gators8282. We could have certainly just weeded that out and said, let's run that automator one more time. But no, Gators8282 is the winner, the third winner of the $100 cash. The other thing we did not mention, this is our 400th episode. And I know we mentioned it in the previous podcast a couple times over the last couple weeks. We're running a $400 cash contest on Twitter. Go to Bet the Board Pod Twitter feed. The post went up at 11 a.m. Eastern. It is pinned to the top of the page. It's very simple. You pick the spread winner, you pick the total winner, and then you pick a player to have the most total yards and how many. The winner of that, $400 cash and some BTB swag. So head over there now. You have to be a follower. You have to retweet the post. So if you don't have a Twitter account, I would sign up for one. But again, Bet the Board Pod, the pinned post atop the page. Follow directions and just throw your picks in the comment section and hopefully you win $400 cash.
Yeah, speaking of Bet the Board swag, if you're looking to try and figure out what you can buy for that sports gambler in your life, the Bet the Board shop has plenty of great options that are there. We don't push a ton of merch, but for those folks who may want a polo, may want something a little bit fancy, there are still some good options. You can showcase the Bet the Board brand with pride, no matter what sports book you go to or where you choose to bet your game. So I encourage you to do that as well. All right, my good man, I think we've done enough damage for a Monday morning. Anything you'd like to share before we reconvene on Wednesday to talk about a few college football conference championship games?
That's everything. Let's get out of Dodge. See everyone for conference championships on Wednesday.
You got it. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. Enter the free contest, skill-based, but chance to win some cash and prizes. And hopefully, regardless of how you decide to invest in tonight's Monday Night Football game between Seattle and the Washington football team, we'll see you at the window.